Picture this: your brain, glowing in slow motion under the soft haze of a late-night MRI scan, firing in pulses like distant lightning over a dark ocean. Every flicker means something: an itch of curiosity, a microsecond of joy, the ghost of a memory so faint you can't tell if it's real. Hello, and welcome to Sleep Science, where curiosity settles in the quiet and science is told in the breath between thoughts. Tonight, you don't need to memorize a single term or chase a single fact. You only have to follow the warmth of the story. You can let your body sink into the mattress, loosen your jaw, feel your breath slip into an easy rhythm. If your mind drifts away for a moment, that's fine. Pleasure is patient, and will be here when you return. The science of pleasure is often presented like a machine manual. Dopamine does this, oxytocin does that, serotonin turns this knob. But you're not a circuit board, and your brain doesn't just run like a computer. It hums, it flutters, it aches, it sings. In the language of biology, pleasure is simply a state where your brain is flooded with rewarding chemical signals. In the language of lived experience, it's the warmth of a hand brushing yours, the sudden smile you weren't expecting, the feeling of being known. Scientists have spent decades trying to map this feeling, sticking electrodes into rat brains, scanning lovers in MRI tubes, even measuring hormone levels after long hugs. And still, the core of it slips through like water, through fingers. Imagine a world where you could see your own pleasure in real time, a glowing topographical map of the brain's reward circuitry. The ventral tegmental area lights first, like the first lamp in a quiet street at dusk, sending dopamine into the nucleus accumbens, where anticipation blooms. The prefrontal cortex joins in, framing the experience with meaning, memory, and story. You might think the feeling starts with the body, but in truth, the body is only a doorway. The brain is the theater, the stage, the audience, and the applause. And here's the twist: your brain isn't wired for one type of pleasure. The system that makes you crave chocolate is the same one that makes you lean in for a kiss. That's why scientists studying addiction often find themselves learning about love, and why neurologists studying love sometimes sound like they're describing a drug. Both share the same basic architecture: dopamine pathways that reward behavior and encourage you to seek it again. It's one of the few cases in science where the metaphors aren't exaggerations. Love can feel like a high. Withdrawal from love can feel like physical pain, and long-term attachment can feel like the softest, slowest drug you'll ever take. You've probably experienced it without thinking. The way your chest feels lighter when you see someone you've been missing, the small buzz in your fingertips when you brush past them in a crowd. This isn't poetic flourish. It's a measurable shift in neurotransmitter balance, a realignment of brain activity that can be observed, if not fully explained. Even now, scientists still debate whether the reward system evolved specifically for reproductive bonding, or whether it's just a happy accident of a brain designed for survival. A gentle reminder before we drift further: if you're listening because you need to be distracted from the noise of your day, you're in the right place. You're not just learning about neurons and hormones, you're listening to the story of how your brain builds joy, connection, and intimacy from nothing but electrical signals. And maybe, as you settle deeper into this moment, you'll realize the truth. The science of pleasure isn't just about what happens in your head. It's about how your head makes the world worth being in. You're lying there in the dark, but in your mind, the curtain has lifted on a different kind of stage. No actors, no costumes, just the delicate circuitry of your own brain, glowing in patterns only you could produce. At the center of it all is something almost mythical in neuroscience: the brain's pleasure circuitry, the wiring that makes you lean toward what feels good and away from what hurts. This isn't a single location, like a magic button you can push to feel bliss. It's a network, a team of regions working together in a kind of whispering conspiracy to keep you alive, engaged, and if possible, happy. The dopamine story always starts in the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, a small cluster of neurons deep in the midbrain. This is where the first spark ignites, sending dopamine toward the nucleus accumbens like a runner carrying a torch. When the signal arrives, the nucleus accumbens blooms with activity, telling you, yes, this matters, pay attention. You might think dopamine is the pleasure chemical, but that's only half the truth. It's not about the moment of pleasure itself. It's about the wanting, the anticipation, the drive to keep moving toward it. That's why your mouth waters before you take a bite of cake, or your heart beats faster when you know you're about to see someone you love. From there, the prefrontal cortex steps in, draping meaning over raw sensation. Without it, you'd just be a creature, chasing impulses. Instead, you're a creature who can remember the last time someone's voice made you feel safe, or imagine the next time you'll share a laugh with them. And weaving in and out of this network are the amygdala and hippocampus emotion and memory, making sure the experience is stored not just as data, but as something worth keeping. Here's the odd fact that always catches people off guard. The same pathways light up whether you're experiencing physical pleasure, eating your favorite food, or just daydreaming about a vacation. Your brain doesn't have a separate department for each kind of joy. It uses the same circuitry, repurposed again and again. That's why a well-timed joke can feel as satisfying as a bite of chocolate, and why listening to your favorite song can bring the same tingling rush as a romantic touch. Scientists still debate whether this system evolved to serve a single purpose, say reproduction, or whether it's a more general reward engine that natural selection simply found too useful to limit. The survival argument makes sense. Creatures that can learn to repeat pleasurable actions, finding food, forming bonds, protecting offspring, are more likely to survive. But that doesn't explain the human capacity for abstract pleasures, like reading poetry or solving puzzles. Those things don't directly feed you or keep you warm, yet they light up the same circuitry, suggesting that once the brain had this network, it couldn't help but use it for everything. And the funny thing, you can trick it. You can think about something delightful and your brain will respond as though it's happening. You can remember a touch from years ago and feel your pulse change. You can even watch someone else's joy and feel it secondhand thanks to mirror neurons, those little empathy engines that make your brain echo the feelings of others. As you listen now, you're not just learning this in theory, your own pleasure circuitry is quietly responding. The warm comfort of the blanket, the rhythm of the voice in your ears, even the steady breath you're taking each is feeding tiny currents into the same network. The VTA fires, the nucleus accumbens answers, the prefrontal cortex shapes it into meaning. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's happening now, in you. And maybe you'll drift off tonight with the faint sense that your brain is not just carrying you through the world, it's also, in its quiet way, trying to make that world worth staying in. Some pleasures are sudden, like a spark in dry grass. Others are slow, warm, and enveloping, like sinking into a bath after a long day. Oxytocin belongs to that second category. It's the hormone that doesn't just make you feel good, it makes you feel connected, tethered, woven into the life of another. Scientists call it the cuddle chemical because its release is tied so closely to touch, but its reach goes far beyond holding hands or curling up under a blanket. Oxytocin is produced in the hypothalamus and released into the bloodstream by the pituitary gland, yet its more magical work happens inside the brain itself. It's there that it whispers to the amygdala, calming fear responses and replacing them with a sense of safety. It floods the nucleus accumbens, reinforcing the idea that the person next to you is worth your trust. It's why eye contact can feel electric without being sexual, and why a lingering hug can soften even the sharpest mood. One of the strangest facts about oxytocin is that it plays a role in both the very start of life and the quiet end of stress. It's involved in childbirth, in nursing, in the small unconscious gestures parents make when soothing a baby. That same chemistry reappears decades later when you're simply holding someone's hand during a difficult conversation. In both cases, the body is doing the same thing, saying, "You're safe here." You felt it even if you didn't know its name. It's in the way your muscles unclench when someone rests a hand on your shoulder, or how you find yourself leaning in when a close friend lowers their voice. These micro moments of connection are little chemical exchanges, invisible but real, like postcards your brain is sending to your body. Stay here, this matters. Oddly, oxytocin isn't always sweetness and light. Scientists still debate whether it's a universal love hormone or more of a social glue that binds you to your in-group, sometimes making you more defensive toward outsiders. In some studies, higher oxytocin levels have been linked not just to empathy, but also to stronger feelings of loyalty that can tip over into suspicion of strangers. Your brain, it seems, cares deeply about connection, but it also keeps a ledger of who gets to be in that circle. That circle can be expanded, though, and it's not limited to romance. Oxytocin rises when you pet a dog, when you laugh with a coworker, when you share a meal. It's a hormone that thrives on proximity and trust, and it's part of why humans are wired for social living. In an evolutionary sense, it probably helped our ancestors survive. Groups that bonded and trusted one another had a better chance of defending against threats and raising children. Right now, as you're listening, you could even give your oxytocin a nudge. Think of someone whose presence makes you exhale just a little more deeply. Picture the texture of their voice, the scent of their skin, the way they tilt their head when they're amused. Even in imagination, your brain can respond, heart rate slowing, breath evening out, that faint but unmistakable sense of being home. And the longer you hold that image, the more your mind treats it as real. If pleasure circuitry is the spark, oxytocin is the hearth, steady, warm, quietly holding the space where connection can burn without consuming. It's not the rush of the chase or the thrill of anticipation. It's the moment after, when the world narrows to just the closeness between you and another, and everything else can wait. If oxytocin is the warmth that holds you close, then love, at least in its early stages, is the wildfire that refuses to be contained. Neuroscientists have a slightly less romantic name for it: behavioral addiction. Not because it's bad for you, but because the brain treats infatuation almost exactly the way it treats a potent drug. The same dopamine pathways you learned about earlier don't just light up, they blaze, pushing you toward the person you want with the same urgency. A smoker reaches for a cigarette, or a gambler feeds another coin into a slot machine. Functional MRI scans of people newly in love reveal a predictable pattern. Activity spikes in the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens, just as it does with addictive substances. But there's more. The caudate nucleus, a structure linked to learning and habit formation, is busy too, essentially carving the other person into your daily mental routine. This is why a new crush can dominate your thoughts, even when you're trying to focus on something else. Your brain is, quite literally, rehearsing how to think about them. Scientists still debate whether calling love an addiction is helpful or misleading. On one hand, it captures the truth about how overpowering early-stage romance can feel. On the other, it ignores the fact that this addiction is often mutual and adaptive, helping two people form a strong pair bond. From an evolutionary perspective, that makes perfect sense. Intense focus on a partner during the early stages of a relationship would have increased the odds of staying together long enough to raise children. But from a purely subjective perspective, it can feel like madness. You might remember a time when a single message notification set your pulse racing, or when you rearranged your schedule for even a few minutes with someone. That wasn't just you being dramatic. It was your brain's reward system setting off fireworks to keep you engaged. And like any high, it can lead to withdrawal. When you're apart from the person you're newly attached to, dopamine levels drop and the craving intensifies. That's why early love feels both exhilarating and exhausting. It's a loop of anticipation and reward, absence and longing. Here's an odd fact. This love high doesn't necessarily fade for everyone. In some couples, decades in, brain scans still show activity in those same reward pathways when they look at each other's faces. For most, though, the intensity shifts over time, replaced by the steadier, oxytocin-driven bond that feels less like a sprint and more like a quiet walk you never want to end. Of course, the brain's eagerness for this rush can lead it astray. That's why infatuation can sometimes make us ignore red flags or rationalize away things we'd normally question. In neurological terms, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational judgment, gets a little quieter under the influence of all that dopamine. The result? Love can make you bold, make you foolish, make you overlook inconvenient facts in favor of the story you want to be true. If that sounds a little dangerous, remember that your brain isn't trying to sabotage you, it's just running an ancient survival program in a modern world. You can laugh about it now, thinking of times you were caught in that heady mix of obsession and delight, where every glance was a plot twist and every conversation felt like a secret. And if you're there right now, listening with someone in mind, you might even feel your heart speeding up, your body leaning into the memory. That's not coincidence. That's your brain reminding you that, in its own language, love and addiction have always been speaking the same dialect. If dopamine is the spark and oxytocin the hearth, serotonin is the quiet architect of your emotional weather. You notice it most when it's missing that foggy, restless feeling when you can't quite settle into joy, or the way small annoyances suddenly seem enormous. In the context of love and desire, serotonin plays a subtler but equally powerful role. It shapes the lens through which you interpret everything, from the curve of a smile to the tone of a single word. When you first fall in love, serotonin levels often drop. It sounds counterintuitive, shouldn't a happy state mean more serotonin? But in those dizzying early days, the brain temporarily shifts its balance. Lower serotonin is linked to obsessive thinking, which might explain why you can't stop replaying conversations or imagining the next meeting. Scientists studying people newly in love have found serotonin patterns strikingly similar to those in patients with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Your brain, it seems, temporarily becomes a little obsessive in service of connection. Over time, as relationships settle into steadier rhythms, serotonin levels usually normalize. This rebalancing helps ease the constant mental loop, allowing you to focus on other things without losing the bond. It's one reason long-term love feels calmer. Your brain is no longer in a state of hypervigilance about every little sign from your partner. The serotonin system shifts from obsession to maintenance, smoothing out mood and supporting a steady emotional baseline. Oddly enough, serotonin also affects attraction in a less obvious way. It influences how sensitive you are to social cues. Low serotonin can make you more reactive, quicker to perceive rejection or criticism, while balanced serotonin can help you read interactions more generously. This means your chemistry doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how you interpret what others do, which in turn shapes the course of your relationships. Scientists still debate how much serotonin levels can be consciously influenced. Sunlight, exercise, and certain foods can boost its production, but the interplay with genetics and environment makes it complex. In romance, though, it's clear that serotonin is part of a larger balancing act, working alongside dopamine's highs and oxytocin's warmth to create an emotional landscape that feels safe yet alive. You might have noticed this yourself, the way a good mood makes you more open to noticing someone's charm, or how stress can cloud your ability to appreciate kindness. That's serotonin at work in the background, fine-tuning your receptiveness to connection. In this sense, love isn't just about who's in front of you, it's also about the internal state you bring to the moment. There's a quiet humor in realizing your brain is constantly juggling these chemicals like an invisible bartender, adjusting the ratios based on your experiences, your thoughts, and even the time of day. You could be sipping coffee, thinking you're simply in the mood for conversation, when in reality a subtle neurochemical cocktail is at play, tilting your attention toward connection. Right now, as you listen, your serotonin is doing its part to steady the ship. The calm tone, the absence of demands, the slow drift of ideas their cues, your brain can read as safety, which in turn supports the balance that makes pleasure sustainable. And maybe, as your eyelids grow heavier, you'll find it comforting to know that even in rest, your brain is still tending its internal weather, quietly working to make room for joy. You don't always think of your skin as an organ, but it is, and it's the largest one you have. Beneath its surface lies an entire landscape of nerve endings, each tuned to a different kind of touch. The sharp warning of pain, the quick flicker of a tickle, the slow warmth of a caress. The moment something brushes your skin, those nerve endings send electrical signals racing along sensory pathways toward the somatosensory cortex, the strip of brain tissue that maps your entire body in exquisite detail. This map is so precise that scientists can tell which fingertip you're touching just by looking at the brain's activity. In the context of pleasure, touch becomes more than information. It becomes a bridge between body and emotion. The sensation doesn't just stop in the somatosensory cortex. It travels to the insular and the anterior cingulate cortex, where physical contact is infused with emotional tone. This is why the same pressure can feel soothing from one person and uncomfortable from another. Your brain isn't only reading the texture or temperature, it's reading the meaning. Oddly, your skin isn't uniform in its sensitivity to pleasure. There are specialized nerve fibers, called C-tactile afferents, that respond most strongly to gentle, slow strokes, exactly the kind of touch often used between loved ones. When these fibers fire, they activate brain regions tied to reward and bonding, creating a chemical echo of safety and connection. You can think of them as the built-in wiring for tenderness. Scientists still debate the evolutionary origins of this sensitivity. Some propose it helped early humans form stronger social bonds, encouraging cooperative living. Others argue it's a side effect of a nervous system designed for broader sensory processing. Either way, its effects of profound touch can lower cortisol, steady heart rate, and even strengthen immune response over time. You've likely felt this without naming it. The instant your shoulders loosen when someone brushes lint from your sweater, the way your breathing slows when a friend squeezes your hand in reassurance. These aren't just sentimental responses, they're your nervous system recalibrating in real time, telling the rest of your body that you are, for now, safe enough to soften. Touch can also act as a form of unspoken communication. A quick pat on the back can convey pride. A lingering handshake can hint at warmth or interest. A playful nudge can spark laughter. Your brain can decode these micro-gestures almost instantly, often faster than spoken language. That's why a relationship without physical contact can feel strangely incomplete, even if the words are loving the map in your brain is missing part of the signal. Right now, even without someone physically near, you can conjure the memory of touch and still activate much of the same circuitry. Think of a cool breeze against your arm, the weight of a cat settling onto your lap, the faint vibration of a friend's laugh as you hug. Your skin is both shield and gateway, protecting you from the world while also letting it in. And when it comes to pleasure, the moments that linger often start there, in the quiet conversation between nerve endings and the mind that listens to them. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the faint trace of perfume on a scarf, or the sharp, clean scent after a summer storm. Smell is the most direct of all the senses. It bypasses the thalamus, the brain's central relay station, and goes straight to the limbic system, where emotion and memory live side by side. This is why scent can take you back years in a heartbeat, reviving the texture of a moment you thought you'd forgotten. And in the world of attraction, smell operates like a secret handshake between biology and desire. At the center of this is the olfactory bulb, a small structure at the front of the brain that receives signals from receptors inside your nose. These receptors detect volatile molecules, tiny airborne particles released by flowers, food, skin. Some of these molecules are simply pleasant. Others may carry subtle information about a person's genetic compatibility through what's known as the Major Histocompatibility Complex, or MHC. Studies have suggested that people may be subconsciously drawn to partners with different MHC genes, potentially boosting the immune strength of any future offspring. You've probably experienced this on a smaller scale. Certain people just smell right to you, even if you can't define the scent. It's not necessarily about cologne or shampoo. It's about the unique chemical signature of their skin and hair. When that signature fits your brain's hidden preference, the result can be a quiet surge of comfort, trust, or even longing. Scent also links directly to the amygdala, which helps determine the emotional weight of sensory input. That's why the smell of wood smoke might feel romantic to one person and suffocating to another. Your brain has paired that scent with past experiences, good or bad. In romance, this can mean that the way someone smells in a specific context becomes part of your memory of them, inseparable from the emotions you felt at the time. Oddly, scientists still debate the role of pheromones in human attraction. Insects and many mammals rely heavily on these chemical signals for mating, but human evidence is more subtle. Some studies suggest certain compounds in sweat or tears can influence mood or hormone levels in others, while others argue the effects are too small to matter. Either way, scent undeniably shapes perception. It can make someone seem more familiar, more approachable, or more intriguing. You can test this yourself. Think of someone you've been close to and try to recall their scent not in vague terms, but as precisely as you can. Was it warm and sweet, like baked bread? Was it sharp and green, like crushed leaves? Notice how the memory pulls in not just smell, but the sound of their voice, the feeling of their presence. This is the olfactory system's signature move, tying senses together into a single vivid package your brain can reopen at will. And here's the comforting truth. Pleasure isn't always about what's in front of you. Sometimes it's in the echo of a scent that lingers long after someone has gone, proof that the brain knows how to keep what it loves close, even in absence. The human brain is wired to find patterns, and nowhere is that more obvious than in the way we respond to faces and bodies. Long before you know someone's name, your visual system has scanned their proportions, symmetry, posture, and micro-expressions, quietly adding up the data to form an impression of beauty or at least interest. This process starts in the occipital lobe, where raw visual information is assembled and flows forward to the fusiform face area, a specialized region that lights up when you see a human face. From there, signals spread into the amygdala, linking what you see with an emotional reaction. Symmetry tends to catch the brain's attention because it often signals health in evolutionary terms. But the attraction isn't purely biological. Culture layers its own preferences on top, shaping ideals of body shape, skin tone, and style. Your brain is constantly balancing these influences, the deep, ancient pull towards certain visual cues and the learned appreciation for whatever your society considers beautiful at the moment. Then there's the role of movement. A static photo might spark interest, but real-life attraction deepens when you watch someone's expressions shift, their eyes flicker, or their posture change as they speak. These small movements are rich in non-verbal information, revealing confidence, openness, or warmth. The superior temporal sulcus, a region of the brain tuned to biological motion, processes these cues almost instantly. It's part of why a fleeting glance can feel so charged. Your brain reads far more into it than you consciously realize. Oddly enough, the eyes themselves hold a special status. Beyond color or shape, the dilation of pupils can subtly signal interest or arousal, a response that's automatic and hard to fake. We're drawn to eyes not just because they're windows to the soul, but because they're windows to the nervous system. Even without words, a steady gaze can activate reward circuits, deepening a sense of connection. Scientists still debate whether attraction based on visual cues is more about reproductive strategy or social bonding. In many species, visual signals clearly advertise fitness to potential mates. In humans, though, the story is more layered. Beauty can foster trust, signal social status, or simply invite conversation. The same face might look stunning to one person and ordinary to another, depending on personal history and emotional state. You've likely felt this shift in real time. Someone you barely noticed at first becomes captivating once you share laughter or a moment of kindness. The reverse can happen, too perfect symmetry losing its shine when the emotional connection is absent. In this way, your visual system isn't working alone. It's in constant dialogue with memory, emotion, and imagination. Even now, you might find yourself picturing a face that once caught your attention. Maybe you can see the angle of light across their cheek, the way their smile started before it reached their mouth. That image is stored not just as a picture, but as an emotional event stitched into the tapestry of your pleasure circuitry. And whether it's the curve of a lip or the warmth in someone's gaze, your brain knows that beauty isn't just seen, it's felt. There's a peculiar truth about pleasure. Sometimes the waiting is as intoxicating as the moment itself. In neuroscience, this isn't a poetic flourish. It's measurable. Anticipation lights up the same dopamine circuits as the reward, and in some cases, those circuits flare even brighter before the payoff. It's the brain's way of turning expectation into motivation, like dangling a lantern just ahead on a dark path so you'll keep walking toward it. This is why the build-up to a kiss can feel electric, why a text that says, "I have a surprise for you," can occupy your thoughts all day. The ventral striatum, a hub in the brain's reward network, becomes especially active when you're looking forward to something, even before you know exactly what it is. Dopamine here isn't just reinforcing the pleasure, it's teaching you to chase it. The odd fact? The pleasure system is biased toward novelty. A familiar treat still makes you happy, but a new and unexpected one can create a bigger dopamine surge. This explains why the early stages of romance often feel heightened. Every glance, touch, and conversation is a fresh data point for your brain to savor. Over time, novelty naturally fades, but anticipation can still be rekindled when you introduce uncertainty or surprise. Scientists still debate whether this bias toward the not yet is an evolutionary tool for survival or a side effect of how dopamine works. One theory suggests that in an unpredictable environment, anticipating a reward helped early humans explore and find resources. Another theory argues that anticipation itself became rewarding because it encouraged persistence even when results weren't immediate. In daily life, you can see this in the way we plan celebrations, mark dates on calendars, or savor a meal before taking the first bite. The pause, the delay, becomes part of the reward. In relationships, anticipation can act like a small spark that keeps the circuitry warm, playful teasing, planned outings, or even a brief absence that makes the reunion more vivid. You've probably felt it in the smallest things, standing in line for your favorite cafe, knowing your drink will taste better because you had to wait, sitting through the first notes of a favorite song, enjoying the tension before the chorus, noticing your pulse shift when you catch someone's eye across a room but can't walk over just yet. These moments stretch pleasure like a string, making it hum longer. Right now, without even realizing it, you might be anticipating the next image or idea in this quiet conversation. That small lean forward in your attention is your brain's reward system doing its work, reminding you that sometimes the promise of pleasure is a pleasure all its own. Desire has its own seasons, and unlike the weather outside, they're not always predictable. Some of these cycles are written into your biology, choreographed by the ebb and flow of hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. These chemicals aren't just about reproduction, they tune the brain's sensitivity to touch, scent, and emotional connection, subtly influencing when and how attraction ignites. Testosterone, often thought of as the drive hormone, plays a role in both men and women, influencing libido and the brain's reward responsiveness. Higher levels can make the brain more reactive to erotic cues, increasing the salience of sexual imagery, scent, or touch. But testosterone doesn't work in isolation. Estrogen amplifies sensory detail, particularly smell and touch, while also influencing mood and social receptivity. Progesterone, meanwhile, often brings a quieter, more nesting-oriented phase, softening the pull toward novelty and increasing the draw toward emotional closeness. Oddly enough, research shows that these hormonal patterns can subtly influence behavior and even partner preference. For example, during peak fertility, some women's brains become more responsive to certain symmetry cues in faces or voices, while at other times, they may prioritize warmth and reliability over raw attraction. Men, too, experience seasonal and even daily hormonal shifts. Testosterone tends to peak in the morning and decline throughout the day, which can shape patterns of desire. Scientists still debate the balance between biology and environment in these rhythms. Hormones clearly influence attraction, but life events, stress, sleep, and relationship context can amplify or mute those effects. Two people with the same hormonal profile can have completely different experiences of desire based on what's happening in their lives. In long-term relationships, understanding these rhythms can make the difference between feeling out of sync and realizing you're just moving through different phases. Couples sometimes interpret a dip in desire as a sign of emotional trouble, when it might simply be the natural arc of hormonal fluctuation. In this way, awareness can be a form of kindness, knowing when to lean into closeness, when to invite novelty, and when to simply let a quieter season pass without panic. You've likely noticed these shifts in yourself without labeling them, the sudden, inexplicable longing for connection during certain times of the month or year, or the way desire can reawaken after a period of distraction or stress. These aren't failures of willpower or signs of incompatibility, they're the brain and body's ongoing conversation, an ever-changing dance between chemistry and circumstance. Right now, your own hormonal state is part of the mix, shaping how you take in these words. The calm you feel, the focus you have, the openness to reflection, all of it has a chemical signature. And just as the seasons turn without your permission, your internal seasons move on their own schedule, carrying you from one emotional climate to the next, always with the possibility of spring. It's strange how something as simple as pressing your lips to someone else's can hold so much weight in the brain. Kissing is, on the surface, a physical act, but beneath that surface, it's a full neurological event, an orchestration of sensory systems, hormone release, and memory retrieval. The lips are among the most sensitive parts of the human body, packed with nerve endings that send an intense flood of information to the somatosensory cortex. Every subtle shift in pressure, every trace of temperature, every movement is recorded in real time. From there, the signals spread. The act of kissing activates the brain's reward system, lighting up dopamine pathways and releasing oxytocin, reinforcing emotional bonds. Serotonin shifts as well, stabilizing mood and heightening the sense of calm after the initial rush. Even stress hormones like cortisol tend to drop, replaced by a slower heart rate and deeper breathing physiological cues that say, "You're safe here." Oddly enough, not all cultures place the same emphasis on kissing. Anthropologists have found societies where kissing in a romantic sense is rare or absent, suggesting that while the neurochemical potential is universal, the behavior itself is partly cultural. Where it is practiced, it may serve as both a bonding ritual and a subconscious sensory test, exchanging chemical signals through taste and smell, picking up traces of someone's unique biological makeup. Scientists still debate whether kissing evolved as a mate assessment tool, allowing people to subconsciously evaluate genetic compatibility, or whether it began as an affectionate behavior that later acquired romantic significance. Either way, the effects are undeniable. In long-term relationships, kissing can help maintain closeness, acting as a quick reboot for emotional intimacy. Couples who kiss regularly tend to report higher relationship satisfaction, and not just because of the act itself. It's a consistent, tangible signal of ongoing affection. You've likely noticed the different languages of a kiss, the quick peck that says hello, the lingering one that wordlessly says "I've missed you," the slow, unhurried kiss that seems to erase time. Each carries a different neurochemical profile, more oxytocin in the tender ones, more dopamine in the playful or passionate ones. Your brain tags these memories with emotional context, so even years later, the memory of a single kiss can stir sensations that feel immediate. And here's the quiet truth. In a kiss, your brain is not just cataloging sensory data, it's aligning two entire nervous systems, syncing breath, heart rate, and even micro-expressions. For a moment, the boundary between you and them blurs not in a mystical sense, but in a literal, measurable, physiological way. You become part of the same rhythm. Even now, you could think of a kiss from your past, and your brain would replay it not perfectly but vividly enough to feel it in your chest or jaw. That's the enduring trick of the pleasure system. Once it's mapped an experience to connection, it can summon it again, folding time so that the moment is never entirely gone. If kissing is the spark between two people, pair bonding is the slow, steady weaving of lives together. In the brain, this isn't just a sentimental concept, it's a network-level phenomenon. Pair bonds engage the social brain, a set of regions that handle trust, cooperation, and the delicate dance of reading another person's intentions. Chief among these players are the prefrontal cortex, for decision-making and planning, the amygdala for emotional salience, and the temporoparietal junction for empathy and perspective taking. When two people form a long-term bond, these regions don't just activate during moments of affection, they start to coordinate over time. Functional MRI studies show that in committed couples, thinking about a partner can engage many of the same brain regions as actually being with them. This mental stand-in effect is part of why long-distance relationships can survive. Your brain learns to treat imagined closeness as partial reality. At the neurochemical level, oxytocin and vasopressin are the primary architects of pair bonding. Oxytocin fosters emotional trust and intimacy, while vasopressin appears to support commitment and partner preference, especially in monogamous species. Dopamine also plays a background role, keeping the bond rewarding and worth maintaining. Oddly, the same chemicals that once fueled the thrill of new love shift their purpose over time, from chasing novelty to reinforcing stability. Scientists still debate how much of pair bonding is hardwired versus learned. Humans are capable of both long-term monogamy and serial partnerships, and culture heavily influences which path is taken. Yet the underlying brain systems seem to be universal, suggesting that the capacity for deep, enduring connection is part of our evolutionary toolkit. You've probably felt this without thinking about it. The way a partner's presence becomes an unspoken constant, their habits and rhythms almost invisible until they're gone. Your brain is so accustomed to coordinating with theirs that absence feels like static, an interruption in the background music of your life. Over time, pair bonds can extend beyond romance, forming with close friends, family members, even pets. The social brain doesn't require romance to weave connection. It only requires repeated positive association. One curious effect of pair bonding is the blurring of self and other in neural terms. Brain scans of couples often show reduced amygdala activation when viewing a partner's face. Compared to strangers, your brain literally treats them as safer, less likely to pose a threat. The same happens with shared goals. Planning something together activates reward systems more strongly than pursuing it alone. Even now, you might be thinking of someone who has become woven into your daily map, whose laugh you could recognize in a crowded room, whose absence you'd notice in the way your own habits shift. That's pair bonding at work, as much a product of neural circuitry as of shared experience. It's your brain's way of saying, this connection is worth keeping, not just today, but for the long stretch ahead. Love doesn't stand still in the brain, it remodels it. This isn't poetic exaggeration. It's neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to physically change its wiring in response to experience. When you spend years with someone, your neurons begin to carve well-worn pathways around them. Their voice becomes a trigger for calm. Their habits become cues your brain automatically responds to. Their presence becomes part of your mental environment in the same way a favorite song or familiar scent can. Neuroplasticity works quietly. Each shared moment, whether it's an inside joke, a late-night talk, or a repeated morning ritual, strengthens certain synaptic connections. Over time, these associations become so ingrained that your brain treats them as extensions of self. This is why losing a long-term partner, even temporarily, can feel disorienting. Your brain is literally missing part of its internal map. One odd but telling fact. Couples who've been together for decades often develop similar patterns of speech, facial expressions, and even walking pace. This isn't just mimicry, it's the result of years of the brain's mirror neuron system firing in sync, reinforcing shared behaviors until they become second nature. The more you live alongside someone, the more your nervous systems start to anticipate each other's rhythms. Scientists still debate the evolutionary advantage of this deep rewiring. Some argue it's a way to conserve cognitive energy. If you can predict a partner's actions and responses, you can cooperate more efficiently. Others see it as a bonding mechanism, keeping two individuals aligned through both habit and emotional familiarity. Whatever the reason, the effect is real. The brain adapts to love as surely as it adapts to learning a language or mastering an instrument. You've probably experienced this in subtle ways. reaching for the same mug your partner prefers without thinking, knowing what they'll say before they say it, or feeling uneasy when they're away not because of fear, but because your sensory world feels less complete. These aren't just quirks of intimacy, they're the outcome of years of neural tuning. There's humor in it too. Long-term partners sometimes finish each other's sentences, but they also sometimes skip entire conversations because each knows exactly what the other is thinking. It's not telepathy, it's a kind of cognitive shorthand built from thousands of interactions. In this way, love becomes a living archive, stored not in photo albums or text messages, but in the folds of your cortex. Even now, your brain is recording this moment where you're lying, how you're feeling, the rhythm of the words. And if you were to share this with someone close to you later, their brain would build on it too, folding your memory into theirs. That's the quiet power of neuroplasticity in love. It turns two separate minds into a shared, evolving map, one that keeps changing as long as you keep walking it together. When love ends, the brain doesn't just feel sad, it reacts as though it's been injured. Breakups light up many of the same regions that respond to physical pain, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula. These areas are part of what's called the pain matrix, a network that doesn't distinguish much between a broken bone and a broken heart. The body interprets both as a threat to survival, and in a sense, it's not wrong emotional bonds are tied to safety in the brain's oldest wiring. This overlap explains why the language of heartbreak is so physical, aching, throbbing, emptiness. It's not metaphor. Your brain is sending distress signals through the same pathways it uses for injury. Dopamine drops sharply when a relationship ends, leaving a craving for the person much like withdrawal from a drug. Oxytocin, once abundant, fades too, and the absence can feel like cold air where warmth used to be. One odd finding from breakup studies is that looking at a photo of an ex during the early stages of heartbreak can actually cause more activity in reward pathways than in those of pain. Scientists think this reflects the brain's attempt to pull you back toward the source of comfort, even if it's no longer available. It's the addiction loop in reverse your mind, trying to re-establish a supply it has learned to depend on. Scientists still debate whether this intense response is purely an evolutionary mechanism or partly a social construct amplified by culture. In ancestral environments, losing a partner could have meant serious danger, less protection, fewer resources, reduced survival odds. The brain may have evolved to treat separation as an emergency, even in modern times when survival isn't directly at stake. You might remember a breakup that left you restless, unable to sleep, replaying conversations in a loop. This rumination is the prefrontal cortex struggling to reconcile loss, trying to integrate it into the story of your life. Over time, neuroplasticity works in the other direction. New routines form, new associations build, and the emotional charge of old memories fades. But in the beginning, the brain resists, clinging to familiar patterns even when they've been broken. There's a strange comfort in knowing that heartbreak is, in a way, the brain doing its job. It's proof that connection mattered, that your nervous system had invested deeply enough to protest its loss. And just as pleasure circuits can be rekindled, so can the systems that support trust and joy. Even now, if you think about a time when grief softened, when laughter returned unexpectedly, or you realized you'd gone a whole day without thinking about the past, you're recalling the moment your brain began to rewire for survival again. In the end, the pain of loss is the shadow cast by the depth of connection. The same pathways that once carried joy can carry longing, but given time, they can carry something new, proof that the architecture of love, even when fractured, is built to be rebuilt. Pleasure is not a fixed formula, it's shaped by the culture you grow up in. The brain's reward system is universal, but the cues that trigger it can differ wildly depending on where and when you were born. Attraction, intimacy, even the way love is expressed are filtered through a cultural lens, blending ancient biology with local rules and symbols. In some societies, public displays of affection are expected, woven into daily life. In others, they're rare or frowned upon. These norms don't just influence behavior, they influence how the brain reacts. If you grow up in a culture where touch is common, Your somatosensory cortex may become more attuned to casual contact, interpreting it as friendly or comforting. In a culture where touch is reserved for private moments, the same physical contact might light up reward circuits more intensely, precisely because it's rare. Cultural values can also shape which traits are considered desirable. In some eras and regions, physical strength or body size signaled abundance and health. In others, slimness or agility signaled vitality. Your visual system will still respond to symmetry and certain universal health markers, but your prefrontal cortex, trained by years of cultural input, can override or enhance those responses. Oddly enough, even the neurochemistry of love can be modulated by cultural habits. For example, societies with strong communal dining traditions often see food and social bonding linked more tightly in the brain's reward pathways. Similarly, cultures that emphasize arranged marriages may rely less on the dopamine-fueled high of infatuation and more on the oxytocin-driven trust that builds over time. Scientists still debate how much of attraction is hardwired versus culturally sculpted. Cross-cultural studies show some remarkable consistencies, like the universal appeal of genuine smiles, but also striking differences, such as how quickly relationships move toward physical intimacy. These differences suggest that while the brain comes with a basic pleasure blueprint, culture is the decorator, deciding the colors and patterns. You've probably felt this when traveling or meeting someone from a different background. What you consider a natural sign of interest might be read differently elsewhere. What you think of as romantic could strike someone else as excessive or strange. And yet, beneath these surface differences, the same brain systems are at work: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, just responding to different signals. There's something comforting about this universality. It means that while the details of love and pleasure may vary, the core experience is a shared human inheritance. Whether it's a whispered conversation under starlight in one country or a bold public declaration in another, the brain's reward circuitry hums with the same basic music. The melody is ancient, the arrangement is endlessly changeable. Even now, as you think about your own cultural lens, what you've learned to find attractive, how you've been taught to express affection, you're seeing the blend of biology and upbringing that shapes your personal pleasure map. And knowing this, you can begin to notice not just what your brain responds to, but why. Long before the invention of language, humans were already using music and movement to signal attraction. The brain reads rhythm and motion as cues not just for coordination, but for vitality and social connection. When you hear a beat that makes you want to tap your foot or watch someone move with effortless timing, your auditory and motor systems are syncing in ways that can feel surprisingly intimate. Music activates the brain's reward network in a way that overlaps with both food and sexual pleasure. Dopamine release surges in the striatum during peak moments of a song, especially when those moments are anticipated. Add movement, dance, swaying, even subtle gestures, and you recruit the cerebellum and motor cortex, creating a whole-body pleasure loop. It's no wonder that dance has been used for centuries as a form of courtship. It combines physical display, rhythm, and social bonding into one package. Oddly, scientists have found that synchronized movement, whether it's two people dancing or a crowd clapping in time, can increase feelings of trust and cooperation. Oxytocin levels often rise after group musical activity, which might explain why concerts and festivals can leave you feeling bonded with strangers. In a romantic context, moving in sync with someone can make you feel more connected, even if you've only just met. From an evolutionary perspective, the ability to move to a beat might have served as a fitness display showing coordination, stamina, and perhaps even a shared sense of timing that would be useful in cooperative tasks. In modern terms, it can still act as a shorthand for compatibility. If you can find the same groove, you might find the same rhythm in other parts of life. You've probably felt this in small, almost invisible ways: walking in step with someone without planning to, laughing at the same moment in a song lyric, or unconsciously matching someone's body language during a conversation. These micro-synchronies signal to the brain that the other person is in tune with you, which can subtly heighten attraction. Scientists still debate whether the pleasure of music and dance is a byproduct of our brain's pattern recognition systems or a specialized adaptation for social bonding. Either way, the effect is potent melody and movement bypass much of our rational filtering and go straight to the emotional core. Even now, you could close your eyes and recall a moment when music and connection blended: a slow sway at a wedding, a ridiculous dance in a kitchen, the hum of a shared song on a long drive. Your brain doesn't just store the sound, it stores the way your body moved, the air felt, the look in the other person's eyes. Music ends, but the neural echo lingers, proof that rhythm can be as intimate as touch. If music and movement are the dance of attraction, then humor is its sudden spark, the flash that collapses distance in an instant. When someone makes you laugh, your brain isn't just reacting to a joke, it's registering shared understanding, rapid mental agility, and a momentary alignment of perspective. That's powerful, because in evolutionary terms, reading another person's mind, even briefly, was a survival skill, and now it's a shortcut to connection. Humor activates the brain's mesolimbic reward system, releasing dopamine in ways similar to other pleasurable experiences. Laughter also triggers endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, which leave a lingering warmth and ease. But there's more beneath the surface. When you laugh with someone, your prefrontal cortex, amygdala, and temporal lobes all engage in a rapid-fire exchange, processing surprise, social context, and timing. It's like watching two minds shake hands in under a second. Oddly, scientists have found that laughter is far older than language. Primates laugh during play, and the structure of that laughter, short bursts of sound tied to social interaction, is strikingly similar to ours. In humans, shared laughter can lower cortisol, smooth over awkwardness, and even make strangers feel like allies. From a romantic perspective, it signals safety, intelligence, and a willingness to play, all of which feed into the brain's pleasure systems. The social brain treats humor as a bonding accelerant. In studies of couples, those who laugh together more frequently tend to report higher relationship satisfaction. It's not just because life feels lighter, it's because laughter is a cue that you can navigate unpredictability together. A shared joke is essentially a micro-trust exercise. You're betting that the other person will follow your mental leap and find the same thing funny. When they do, both brains reward the moment with a surge of positive emotion. You've probably felt this in action, the way a well-timed laugh can dissolve tension, or how an inside joke can turn a mundane moment into something memorable. Sometimes, the humor isn't even that clever, it's the fact that you're laughing together that matters. Your mirror neuron system picks up the other person's smile, crinkles around the eyes, and vocal rhythm, nudging your own body to match. Before you know it, you're sharing an emotional state without exchanging a single serious word. Scientists still debate whether humor evolved mainly as a sexual display showing wit and mental speed, or as a cooperative glue that kept early human groups cohesive. Either way, its power is hard to overstate. Humor can bypass barriers that words alone can't breach, softening the edges of formality or fear. Right now, you might even recall a moment when laughter tipped something in your life, when it shifted a stranger into a friend into something more. The memory probably still carries a spark, because your brain has tagged it as proof of connection. In that way, humor isn't just a light touch on the surface of a relationship, it's a thread in the deeper fabric, one that can pull you closer with every shared smile. Pleasure isn't only about what happens when you're awake, it's also shaped by what happens when you sleep. Your brain uses those quiet hours to restore chemical balance, clear out metabolic waste, and integrate emotional experiences, all of which feed directly into your capacity for intimacy. If you've ever noticed how much more patient, affectionate, or even flirtatious you feel after a good night's rest, that's not just mood, it's biology. During deep, slow-wave sleep, the brain repairs and recalibrates neurotransmitter systems, including dopamine and serotonin pathways. These systems are essential for motivation, mood stability, and reward sensitivity, three pillars of healthy desire. REM sleep, on the other hand, is where emotional memories are processed and stored. It's in REM that the amygdala and hippocampus work together to sort through the day's social and romantic interactions, filing them into long-term memory while reducing their emotional volatility. Oddly, the link between sleep and sexual health is bidirectional. Just as good sleep supports desire, healthy sexual activity can improve sleep quality. Oxytocin and prolactin, both released during sexual intimacy, promote relaxation and drowsiness, helping the brain transition into restorative stages of sleep. It's one of the few feedback loops in the body that can make both partners happier and healthier without requiring extra effort, just time and connection. Scientists still debate exactly how much sleep deprivation affects libido, but the evidence is strong that even a small reduction in sleep quality can dampen interest in intimacy. Sleep loss elevates cortisol, the stress hormone, which can interfere with testosterone and estrogen production. It also dulls the prefrontal cortex's ability to focus on social and emotional cues, making connection feel like work rather than pleasure. You might have noticed this yourself. On days when you've slept well, your body feels more receptive to touch, your mind more open to playful conversation. When you're tired, even small affectionate gestures can go unnoticed, not because they matter less, but because the brain is too busy trying to manage basic energy needs. There's a quiet lesson here. Intimacy isn't just built in candlelit moments or passionate encounters, it's maintained in the unglamorous, consistent care of your body's rhythms. Going to bed on time, making space for rest, and protecting sleep from the constant pull of screens or stress are, in their own way, acts of love. Right now, as you listen in this low-light moment, your body might already be preparing for its nightly reset. Heart rate easing, breathing slowing, brainwaves drifting toward that first gentle slope into sleep. And when you wake, the quiet chemistry of the night will have done its work, readying you again for the small and large pleasures that weave connection through your days. Pleasure doesn't live in isolation, it shares pathways, and one of its closest partners is food. The same brain regions that respond to the taste of something delicious often light up during sexual pleasure, hinting at a shared evolutionary history. In both cases, the ventral striatum, orbitofrontal cortex, and insula are involved, processing reward, sensory detail, and emotional significance. It makes sense. Both eating and intimacy are vital for survival, and both rely on multisensory experiences to create a lasting impact. When you eat something rich and flavorful, the tongue's taste buds send signals through the gustatory pathway to the brain, where they're combined with input from smell, texture, and even temperature. This multisensory integration is mirrored in sexual pleasure, where touch, scent, and visual cues blend to create a single unified experience. In both cases, dopamine plays the starring role in anticipation, while endogenous opioids, the brain's own pain-relieving, pleasure-inducing chemicals enhance the sense of satisfaction once the experience begins. Oddly enough, studies show that even the language we use for food borrows from intimacy, decadent, indulgent, sinful. This isn't just metaphor. It reflects the way our brains process both types of pleasure in similar ways. A candlelit dinner can trigger the same anticipatory reward systems as the romantic connection that might follow, priming the mind for deeper interaction. Scientists still debate whether the overlap between food and sexual pleasure is simply a quirk of shared neural wiring, or whether the two have been mutually reinforcing for much of human history. In ancestral environments, sharing food could have been a bonding ritual, a way to build trust and cooperation that might later support romantic or reproductive partnerships. Even now, sharing a meal with someone can accelerate feelings of closeness, dopamine spikes when we coordinate our actions, like passing plates or matching bites. You've probably noticed how certain flavors or meals become linked to specific memories, a dessert that recalls a first date, a particular wine that brings back a holiday. The hippocampus stores these associations, tying sensory pleasure to emotional context, so that even years later, a taste can unlock an entire scene. And here's a curious twist. Just as a relationship can deepen your enjoyment of food, food can deepen your sense of connection in a relationship. Cooking together, feeding each other, or simply lingering over a shared plate can create moments of synchronized attention and mutual care. The brain treats these as social rewards, reinforcing the bond. Even now, you could imagine a favorite meal in detail, the scent rising from the plate, the first bite, the texture against your tongue. Notice how your body responds, perhaps with a small shift in posture or a deepening breath. That's your brain's reward system at work, and it's the same machinery that turns a gentle touch or a shared smile into something that feels worth remembering. Pleasure and stress have a complicated relationship. Sometimes they pull in opposite directions, sometimes they twist together in ways that are hard to untangle. At the chemical level, stress is driven by cortisol, a hormone released by the adrenal glands in response to perceived threat or pressure. In small bursts, cortisol can sharpen focus and even heighten desire, especially in situations that feel exciting rather than dangerous. But when it lingers, it starts to erode the very systems that support intimacy. Chronic stress can blunt dopamine release, making rewards feel muted. It can interfere with the production of sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen, dampening libido over time. It also activates the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, which shifts attention toward potential threats and away from social or romantic cues. That's why, in periods of prolonged stress, you might feel disconnected from partners or less inclined toward touch and affection. The brain is prioritizing survival over bonding. Oddly enough, mild stress can sometimes act as an amplifier for attraction. The body's heightened state, faster heartbeat, quicker breathing can overlap with the physiological signs of arousal, leading to what psychologists call misattribution of arousal. It's why a date on a roller coaster or in a suspenseful movie can feel more intense. The brain blends the thrill with the company you're in. Scientists still debate the best ways to buffer pleasure systems against stress. Some point to mindfulness and deep breathing as tools to regulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) axis, calming the cascade before it becomes overwhelming. Others emphasize the role of supportive touch, which can lower cortisol through oxytocin release, restoring the body's sense of safety. You might have noticed this in your own life, how a single warm interaction on a hard day can shift your entire mood, or how laughter with someone you trust can temporarily dissolve tension. These aren't coincidences, they're biological resets. By engaging the brain's reward system, moments of connection can override the stress response, at least for a while. There's humor in the way the brain juggles these competing priorities. You could be worrying about deadlines one minute and find yourself completely absorbed in a conversation the next, as if the stress never existed. That's the reward circuitry stepping in, insisting on a reminder that life isn't only about solving problems, it's also about experiencing moments that make those problems worth enduring. Right now, you might notice that even hearing about these processes is calming in its own way. Understanding how your brain works can strip some of the mystery from stress, making it feel less like a personal failing and more like a predictable pattern. And in that understanding lies a small kind of pleasure, the knowledge that balance is possible, and that even in stressful times, your brain is still wired for connection. The body has its own theater for pleasure, but the mind can stage an entire performance without moving a muscle. Fantasy is one of the brain's most flexible tools. It lets you explore scenarios, sensations, and emotions entirely in the safety of imagination. From a neuroscience perspective, imagining an experience activates many of the same brain regions as living it. The visual cortex, motor areas, and limbic system all light up, rehearsing neural pathways as if they were receiving input from the outside world. In the realm of sexual pleasure, fantasy engages the prefrontal cortex to craft the scene, the parietal lobes to place you in it, and the amygdala to charge it with emotional intensity. Dopamine release doesn't require real-world contact. Anticipation and mental imagery can be enough to trigger it. That's why a daydream can change your mood in minutes, or why a passing thought can leave your heart rate a little higher. Oddly, scientists have found that the content of fantasies is shaped as much by cultural exposure and personal history as by biological drive. Media, early experiences, and even overheard stories can seed images that later become part of your mental landscape. Over time, these mental templates can shift fantasies, adapt to new relationships, changing desires, or even broader life phases. What's fascinating is how fantasy can bypass certain real-world constraints. You can imagine perfect timing, ideal settings, or conversations that flow without a pause. In fantasy, there's no risk of rejection, no social awkwardness, just the distilled version of what your brain craves most in that moment. This freedom can make fantasy an important part of sexual well-being, especially for people navigating stress, distance, or physical limitations. Scientists still debate whether fantasy functions primarily as practice rehearsing possible scenarios for real life, or as a separate, self-contained source of pleasure. Either way, the overlap between imagined and actual experiences means that fantasy can strengthen the neural connections that support desire, keeping them active even in quiet periods. You've likely felt the power of this without labeling it. A sudden, vivid mental scene that lingers long after it fades, a replay of a moment that never actually happened but feels as if it did. Your brain stores these imagined experiences alongside real ones, sometimes blurring the emotional line between them. Even now, you could close your eyes and summon a place, a person, a mood that feels vivid and private. Notice how your body reacts, the slight change in breathing, the subtle shift in muscle tone. That's not just thought, that's your nervous system responding as though the scene were unfolding here and now. In that sense, fantasy is both a playground and a preservation tool, keeping the circuits of pleasure sharp and ready for when reality arrives to meet them. Desire doesn't vanish with time, it changes shape. As the years pass, the neurobiology of intimacy shifts from the surging highs of novelty to the steadier rhythms of familiarity. The brain's pleasure systems adapt, prioritizing stability, trust, and emotional connection over the intensity of early-stage infatuation. This isn't a loss, it's a remodeling, and for many, it brings a deeper, more sustainable form of closeness. In later decades, dopamine-driven thrills may give way to oxytocin's calming bonds and the endorphins that accompany gentle, consistent affection. Touch often becomes more tender, communication more direct, and shared rituals more central. These changes aren't simply about aging, they're also about the brain refining its reward priorities, favoring pleasures that can be renewed daily over those that rely on constant novelty. Oddly, studies have shown that some long-term couples still display dopamine activity in the ventral tegmental area when looking at each other's photos, even after decades together. The difference is in the balance. The fireworks are tempered by an expanded network of regions tied to empathy, memory, and long-term planning. Love becomes not just about the moment, but about the arc of a shared life. Hormonal shifts also play a role. Men's testosterone levels may gradually decline. Women experience changes in estrogen and progesterone, and both may see shifts in sexual frequency. But this doesn't necessarily reduce pleasure, it can redirect it. Intimacy may center more on emotional depth, physical comfort, and shared experiences that feed the brain's broader reward system. Scientists still debate how much of this evolution is biological necessity versus cultural influence. In societies that value youth-centric beauty, older adults may internalize the idea that passion belongs to the young, even though the brain remains capable of rich sexual and emotional pleasure. In cultures that honor elder intimacy, the later years can be framed as a time when connection is freer, less burdened by insecurity or performance anxiety. You've probably seen glimpses of this in older couples who hold hands without ceremony, whose glances carry years of context, or who laugh together with the ease of people who have weathered storms side by side. Their intimacy isn't about proving attraction, it's about living inside it, as naturally as breathing. Even now, you might imagine your own connections decades from now, the sound of shared footsteps on a quiet evening, the comfort of a voice you've heard for so long that it feels like home. Your brain would still be mapping these experiences to its pleasure circuits, still reinforcing the idea that closeness is worth nurturing whether you're 25 or 75. For centuries, love and intimacy have adapted to new tools. but the pace of change has never been as rapid as it is now. The brain's pleasure circuitry, built over millennia to respond to face-to-face interaction, is now being triggered by screens, algorithms, and invisible digital cues. Apps and social media have made it possible to form connections across continents, yet they've also reshaped the pathways through which attraction and bonding develop. When you see a photo on a dating app, your visual system processes it in the same way it would in person, scanning for symmetry, expression, and signs of health or warmth. But the prefrontal cortex quickly joins in, weighing profile text, mutual interests, or even subconscious biases. What's new is the reward schedule. Swiping, matching, and messaging can create a dopamine loop similar to gambling, where each new interaction is an unpredictable win. This intermittent reinforcement can keep you engaged far longer than you might expect, sometimes independent of actual romantic potential. Oddly, video calls and text exchanges can also stimulate oxytocin release, though usually at lower levels than in-person contact. The brain can treat these digital interactions as emotionally real, especially when they're consistent over time. This is why long-distance couples can maintain intimacy through screens. The neurochemical architecture is still there, adapting to the available medium. Scientists still debate whether digital connection strengthens or weakens long-term bonds. On one hand, technology can broaden your pool of potential partners and sustain contact over distance. On the other, it can encourage a culture of endless novelty, making it harder for the brain to shift from dopamine-driven excitement to oxytocin-driven stability. There's also the question of how curated identities affect attraction. Social media often presents polished, idealized versions of people, which can amplify early interest, but make the transition to real-world interaction more challenging. The brain's reward system thrives on consistency. When reality matches expectation, trust builds. But when the gap is too wide, the prefrontal cortex flags it as a mismatch, dulling the reward. You've probably experienced both sides of this shift. The thrill of an unexpected message lighting up your phone, and the strange flatness of meeting someone who felt different in person than in pixels. Neither is inherently better or worse. They're just different contexts for the same ancient circuitry, now running on a 21st century stage. Even now, your own brain is participating in this digital adaptation. The voice in your ears, the imagined closeness, the shared attention across distance, all of it is processed as social connection, even without physical proximity. It's proof that the brain's pleasure systems aren't fixed relics of the past. They're evolving in real time, learning to find warmth in the glow of a screen. The deeper we understand the brain's pleasure systems, the more tempting it becomes to try to control them. Marketers, app designers, and even some researchers already use insights from neuroscience to capture attention and shape behavior, often blurring the line between harmless engagement and deliberate manipulation. When the same circuitry that bonds you to a loved one can be triggered by a notification sound, the ethical questions become hard to ignore. At its core, manipulating pleasure means adjusting the inputs that drive dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin release. A platform might use intermittent rewards, just like slot machines, to keep you scrolling. A fragrance company might design a scent to hit certain olfactory pathways tied to emotional memory. Even wearable tech could, in theory, deliver microstimuli to mimic the comfort of a hug. None of this is science fiction. The basic principles are already in use. Oddly, the same knowledge that could be used to enhance relationships could also be used to undermine them. Imagine a device that amplifies bonding hormones during advertising, or an AI that subtly adapts its tone to trigger trust. Scientists still debate where the boundary lies between using this knowledge to improve well-being and exploiting it for profit. The challenge is that the brain's reward system evolved for survival, not for resisting engineered temptation. There's also a quieter ethical dilemma. Even when we use pleasure science to help, say, in therapy for trauma or depression, are we changing the experience of love and intimacy itself? If oxytocin sprays or targeted brain stimulation could deepen attachment, would that connection feel authentic, or would it feel manufactured? The brain might not be able to tell the difference, but we might. You've probably seen smaller scale versions of this already. Think of apps that gamify dating, nudging you to check in daily, or media that uses cliffhangers to keep you engaged long past when you intended to stop. These are mild manipulations, but they work because they tap into reward loops that were never designed for infinite novelty. Scientists warn that once we can deliberately dial up or down the brain's pleasure chemistry, the social consequences could be profound. Long-term bonds might become easier to form or easier to dissolve. Attraction could become programmable. Desire might no longer need the messy unpredictability that makes it so human. Even now, as you think about these possibilities, your brain is running a simulation imagining what it would feel like to have your emotions fine-tuned at will. It's unsettling and fascinating at the same time, a reminder that understanding the machinery of love and pleasure comes with a responsibility to protect it. Because in the end, the circuits that give life its sweetness are also the ones that make it most vulnerable to being rewritten. The story of love and pleasure is far from finished. Every year, new studies peel back another layer of the brain's reward circuitry, revealing that what we once thought of as simple attraction is in fact a choreography of countless signals, chemicals, and neural patterns. And yet, for all the precision of the science, the experience itself remains something that resists being reduced to charts and diagrams. You can map the firing of neurons during a kiss, but you can't quite capture the way time seems to loosen its grip in that moment. The future of love and neuroscience will likely bring tools we can barely imagine now, brain-computer interfaces that translate desire directly into sensory experience, pharmacological relationship boosters that fine-tune bonding chemistry, virtual environments that simulate the presence of a partner with unnerving realism. Some of these advances may deepen connection, helping couples rebuild trust or reignite attraction. Others may raise difficult questions about authenticity, privacy, and the very definition of intimacy. Oddly, even as technology advances, the core architecture of pleasure may remain stubbornly unchanged. The ventral tegmental area will still spark with dopamine when something or someone captures your attention. Oxytocin will still wrap moments of safety in warmth. Serotonin will still balance the emotional tone. The brain may accept new inputs, but its basic rules have been set by millions of years of evolution. Scientists still debate whether we'll ever reach a point where love can be engineered as reliably as building a bridge or programming a computer. Even if we could, the unpredictability of connection might be what gives it value, the missed cues, the awkward pauses, the moments of vulnerability that no algorithm can replicate. Love, for all its chemistry, may need its chaos. You've probably felt this paradox yourself. The moments that stand out in memory aren't always the ones that went perfectly. Sometimes it's the near miss, the clumsy joke, or the unexpected confession that makes a connection real. Neuroscience can explain why these moments feel good, but it can't replace the lived texture of them. Even now, as you lie here with the weight of the day slipping away, your own brain is still quietly tending the circuits of pleasure and attachment, still ready to spark at the sight of a smile or the warmth of a hand. No matter how much we learn, the science of pleasure is also the science of being human, and that's a mystery that will always be worth falling asleep to. Pleasure in the brain is not a single switch, but an intricate network of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and other neurochemicals working together. Desire begins in the reward system, sparked by anticipation and novelty, shaped by senses like touch, smell, and sight. Early-stage infatuation mirrors addiction, while long-term love rewires the brain through neuroplasticity, embedding a partner into daily mental life. Hormones guide the seasons of attraction, sleep restores the systems that make intimacy possible, and shared activities like music, food, and laughter deepen bonds. Stress can blunt pleasure, but connection often acts as an antidote, while fantasy keeps the circuits active, even in absence. Culture shapes what we find attractive, and technology is rewriting the contexts in which bonds form. The ethical challenges of manipulating pleasure are growing, as neuroscience offers both tools for healing and opportunities for exploitation. Yet, Despite advances, the brain's core pleasure architecture remains unchanged, anchored in ancient survival systems. Love's unpredictability may be its most essential ingredient, resisting full control or replication. In the end, understanding the science deepens appreciation, but the lived experience, the imperfect, vivid, human moments, will always hold the real magic. End of script. Good night.